Good afternoon. I'm going to cover real quickly a look at newspapers for this week. I primarily looked at gun violence in newspapers from the site that was provided, but also looked a little bit at coverage of Hitler and the Nazi Party and also the Reagan assassination attempt. But starting with the gun violence part, I looked initially at the University of Texas at Austin shooting from August 1st, 1966, where Charles Whitman, a 25-year-old Marine vet, killed 15, injured 31, and also stabbed his mother and wife prior to that to death. Charles Whitman was killed by police after 91 minutes. Afterwards, it was uncovered that he had a pecan-sized brain tumor, and he used a Remington 700, an M1, and a shotgun. The primarily what I was looking at here was bias and propaganda in the media for these. I'll start very quickly with the Reagan assassination attempt. All the articles I looked at didn't seem to have a whole lot of bias regarding guns in the article. That very well could have been because of the impact of the event, that a president had very nearly been assassinated. And then also with Charles Whitman, looked initially two articles by the Washington Post and New York Times, where Governor Connolly of Texas opposed calls for gun control. He happened to have been shot when he was with JFK when JFK was assassinated. He did argue to be tougher on criminals than the insane. He didn't fault the psychiatrist, which a psychiatrist had uncovered or revealed that a couple months prior to the shooting, Charles Whitman told him that he had thought about climbing up on the tower there and shooting people randomly. But in those articles, especially the Washington Post article, I didn't really see any outright bias, and really very little calls for gun control. Following was a New York Times article called "Medicine: Can a Tumor Spell Murder?" This is a look at trying to find an answer to the problem. It was determined that the tumor was malignant, but a panel of 32 stated that it could have contributed to his actions. They also noted an increasing trend towards violence, and that combat-trained soldiers were trained to de-emphasize violence. And they noted that as a problem. But there was very little bias in that article. It was more focused on the medical portion of things. It took until 1966 in a New York Times article titled "What Lessons in the Texas Tragedy," where we really started to see a fair amount of bias come out and a push for gun control. Granted, this was an opinion piece, but a couple quotes that I pulled from there. The first is, "Guns of all sorts are readily available to Americans of all shades of morality and mentality. Counting suicides and accidental shootings, about 17,000 persons are killed annually." Another one, following JFK, that there was a public clamor for stricter gun control over the sale and use of firearms. They noted that gun control had stalled due to NRA opposition. They also noted that the event was shocking because it came only 18 days after the mass murder of 8 student nurses in Chicago, which was actually committed with a knife, although the article failed to mention that. They were using it to, again, push gun control there. And finally, quoted LBJ as saying that there were lessons to be learned in a press for gun control legislation on his part there. Basically, I was kind of surprised to find that immediately after the event, I had a difficult time finding any bias or push for gun control in the media, which is what we see today. However, that 1966 article is where you started to see the exact same arguments that are made today pretty much any time that there is a shooting.